The city of Las Vegas shone brightly in the hot desert night, its neon lights cutting through the darkness like luminous knives. Manny Pacquiao, living legend of world boxing and pride of the Philippines, walked through the luxurious corridors of the Bellagio Hotel with the serene posture he had developed after years in the spotlight. His steps were closely followed by Rodrigo Mendes, a Brazilian muscle recovery specialist who had been recommended by Freddie Roach, Pacquiao's longtime trainer, to complement his team during this stay in Vegas. The Filipino had arrived in the East City 2 days before an important meeting with boxing promoters, seeking a moment of tranquility before the media storm that always surrounded him. The golden elevator doors opened onto the main casino, where the noise of slot machines mingled with the animated conversations of gamblers and the synthetic melodies that permeated the environment. Manny adjusted the luxury watch on his wrist, a gift from a sponsor after his historic victory against Thurman, while his eyes scanned the room full of tourists and professional players. Among the crowd, he recognized some familiar faces from the boxing world, including Mario Barrios, the young Texan pugilist who had been attracting attention in recent months with impressive victories and controversial statements about veterans of the sport. The icy air conditioning contrasted with the suffocating heat that dominated the streets of Vegas that time of year, creating an almost unreal sensation of artificial comfort that so characterized the City of Sins. Manny had promised himself that he would maintain a discreet profile during his stay, avoiding the excesses and temptations that Vegas offered on every corner. His wife Jinky had stayed in the Philippines with their children, trusting that her husband would stay focused on his meetings, away from the distractions that had already harmed his career in the past. The night was still young when Gabriel Torres, an old friend and event entrepreneur, approached with a broad smile and an invitation to the inauguration of Apex, the newest nightclub on the Strip, exclusively frequented by celebrities and elite athletes. Despite his initial hesitation, Manny was tempted by the possibility of relaxing a bit before the intense days ahead, accepting the invitation on the condition that it would be for just a few hours, without excesses or indiscreet photographs that could compromise his public image, now carefully crafted not only as a boxer, but as a political figure and representative of his people. The Apex Club pulsated with electronic beats, while blue and purple lights danced throughout the sophisticated environment, creating an atmosphere of exclusivity that justified the exorbitant prices charged for drinks and the rigorous control at the entrance. Manny Pacquiao was received with reverence by the security guards, who immediately cleared a path for him and his small group to be led to an elevated VIP area, from where one could observe the entire dance floor without being bothered by the curious glances of other patrons. The establishment's manager, Lucas Fontenelle, a middle-aged Frenchman with a heavy accent, made a point of personally serving a bottle of sparkling water to the boxer, respecting his well-known abstinence from alcohol before important commitments. The atmosphere in the club was one of calculated opulence, with celebrities carefully distributed across various lounges to create the impression that this was the only place worth being that night in Vegas. At a nearby table, Mario Barrios celebrated with friends, sporting a gold watch that reflected the strobe lights and drew attention to his muscular arms covered in recent tattoos. The young fighter was clearly more interested in enjoying the night than in maintaining the composure expected of a rising professional athlete, something that did not go unnoticed by Manny's experienced eye. Minutes turned into hours as Manny alternated between casual conversations with his group and moments of silent observation, a habit he had developed over the years to better understand his surroundings. His discreet yet magnetic presence attracted looks of admiration and respect, especially from young fighters frequenting the venue. The contrast between his sobriety and Barrios's extravagance, who was now dancing on a couch while holding a bottle of champagne, was a perfect portrait of two distinct generations and philosophies in the sport. Tension began to form when Eduardo Vega, a Mexican sports commentator known for his controversial opinions and sensationalist style that had propelled his career at ESPN Deportes, approached Manny's table with a provocative smile and began making loud comparisons between the golden era of boxing, represented by Pacquiao, and the new generation of fighters symbolized by Barrios. The commentator's words, amplified by alcohol, floated through the environment like sparks in a powder keg, creating a momentary silence in nearby conversations as everyone awaited the Filipino legend's reaction. Manny's eyes, always calm and calculating, met Barrios's across the crowded hall, establishing a silent connection loaded with meaning and unresolved tension. At that moment, something subtle changed in the club's atmosphere, like the heavy air that precedes a tropical storm, familiar to the Filipino who grew up facing typhoons in his homeland. What should have been a quiet night of relaxation was beginning to transform into something completely different, fueled by egos, resentments, and the eternal rivalry between the established and the emerging, between experience and youthful audacity. The deafening music seemed to decrease in volume as Eduardo Vega's words echoed in the space between Manny Pacquiao and Mario Barrios's tables, creating an invisible battlefield in the middle of the luxurious club. The commentator, sensing the power of his provocations, continued to fuel the tension with increasingly incisive observations about how modern fighters didn't respect the legacy built by giants like Pacquiao, preferring media spectacle to the true art of boxing. The expression on Manny's face remained impassive, the result of years facing much worse provocations in rings and press conferences around the world, but his eyes revealed an intensity rarely seen outside of professional competitions. Rodrigo Mendes, the Brazilian specialist who had been integrated into Pacquiao's team for his revolutionary muscle recovery technique that had helped numerous Olympic athletes, tried to smooth over the moment by suggesting a change of subject, but the damage was already done. Across the room, Barrios had abandoned his carefree dancing and now stood with his arms crossed, staring directly at the VIP table where Manny was seated. His friends, a mix of young fighters and digital influencers eager for viral content, encouraged the confrontation with whispers and poorly disguised laughter, discreetly filming with their smartphones in the hope of capturing something that could become news the next day. The DJ, sensing the change in atmosphere, transitioned to a more aggressive beat, unconsciously amplifying the tension growing between the two groups. Club employees exchanged worried glances, aware of the damage that an altercation between celebrities could cause to the reputation of the newly inaugurated establishment. Sofia Beltran, the security manager with years of experience in elite nightclubs, was already discreetly positioning her team at strategic points, preparing to intervene at the first sign of physical confrontation. That's when Mario, encouraged by alcohol and the audience forming around him, abruptly stood up and began walking toward Pacquiao's table with determined yet slightly unstable steps. His challenging gaze carried all the arrogance of youth that has not yet known true defeat, the kind that shapes character and teaches humility. Conversations around them ceased completely, creating a sonic vacuum filled only by electronic music, and the clinking of glasses being placed on tables as those present adjusted to get a better view of the imminent confrontation. Gabriel Torres, Manny's friend, whispered something in the Filipino's ear, probably advising discretion and reminding him of the commitments of the coming days and the millions in sponsorship contracts that depended on his immaculate image. Manny nodded almost imperceptibly, but did not move from his position, keeping his eyes fixed on Barrios, who was now just a few meters away, his shadow projected by the colored lights creating distorted shapes on the polished floor of the club, like a presage of the chaos that was about to unfold on that seemingly ordinary night in Las Vegas. The silence that formed when Mario Barrios stopped in front of Manny Pacquiao's table had an almost tangible quality, dense as fog over a ring before a historic fight. People around held their breath, smartphones discreetly pointed to capture the moment when two generations of boxing faced off outside the ropes. Mario, with his English laden with Texan slang, began to loudly question the relevance of advice and opinions from veterans like Pacquiao in a sport that, according to him, had evolved beyond traditional techniques. His words, although directed at Manny, were clearly performed for the audience that was forming, each phrase calculated to generate viral clips on social media the next day. Manny's response came with the characteristic calm that had disconcerted so many opponents throughout his career, his low voice forcing everyone to lean in to hear, inverting the power dynamic that Barrios was trying to establish with his elevated volume. The Filipino spoke about respect, tradition, and the invisible sacrifices that sustain long careers in the most solitary sport in the world. Without raising his tone once, Pacquiao mentioned precise statistics from Barrios's recent fights, pointing out technical flaws that only eyes trained by decades of experience could identify, demonstrating that, even removed from the daily spotlight, he still studied each new talent that emerged on the horizon of world boxing. The expressions on Mario's face oscillated between surprise and irritation as the Filipino legend methodically dismantled his juvenile bravado with irrefutable technical arguments. The group of friends who had previously encouraged the confrontation now observed in embarrassed silence, realizing they had grossly underestimated the intelligence and encyclopedic knowledge of Pacquiao about the sport that had defined his life. Eduardo Vega, the commentator who had initiated the whole situation, smiled discreetly in the background, satisfied with the exclusive content he now possessed for his upcoming sports programs. Tension reached its apex when Barrios, cornered by Manny's precise arguments and unable to respond at the same technical level, resorted to personal attacks, mentioning old controversies in the Filipino's career and questioning his motivations to continue fighting after so many years at the top. The change in tone caused Rodrigo Mendez to instantly rise, positioning himself beside his protégé in a protective gesture that clearly communicated that the boundary between professional discussion and personal disrespect had been crossed. At this moment, Lucas Fontanelle, the club manager, materialized beside the fighters as if he had emerged from the marble floor itself, his face a mask of professional cordiality that barely disguised his concern about the direction the situation was taking. With smooth but firm gestures, he tried to lead both to separate areas of the club, offering champagne and privacy as incentives for dispersing the confrontation. His eyes, however, silently communicated with the security team strategically positioned around, preparing to intervene if the heated words evolved into something more physical and potentially devastating for the reputation of the establishment. On its opening night, Lucas Fontanelle's diplomatic attempt to separate the fighters failed when Mario Barrios, visibly altered by alcohol and the frustration of having his arguments publicly dismantled, refused to retreat, planting his feet on the ground as he would in the ring during a defensive clinch. His words began to become louder and less coherent, mixing English with Spanish in a torrent of accusations about generational privileges and media favoritism that had supposedly benefited boxers of Pacquiao's era. Mario's body posture subtly changed, his shoulders leaning forward and his fists involuntarily closing, warning signs that did not go unnoticed by the club's security guards who stepped forward, ready to intervene. Manny Pacquiao, in turn, maintained a surreal calm that dramatically contrasted with the growing agitation around him. Years of meditation and self-discipline had taught him to remain centered even in the most provocative situations. His eyes, however, no longer conveyed the educational patience of minutes ago, but now reflected a seriousness that his opponents in the ring knew well, the look of a predator precisely calculating his next move. When he finally rose from his seat, he did so with the fluidity of a man half his age, a silent reminder of the extraordinary physical conditioning he maintained even away from regular competitions. The environment around seemed to freeze as the two boxers stared at each other at a dangerously close distance, creating an energy vacuum in the middle of the crowded club. The music continued to play, but now seemed distant and irrelevant, like a soundtrack disconnected from the main scene unfolding. Sofia Beltran, the head of security, made a discreet gesture, and her teams began to form an invisible perimeter around the fighters, while simultaneously directing other VIP clients to discreetly move away from the area of potential conflict. That's when Valentina Cruz, an influential fight promoter who had helped Pacquiao at the beginning of his international career and more, recently negotiated Barrios's first big contract, emerged from the crowd and positioned herself between them with the confidence of someone who had managed much bigger egos over decades in the industry. Her words, although inaudible to most present due to the loud music, seemed to have a momentary effect on both men, who took half a step back almost simultaneously. The tension, however, remained palpable in the air, like static electricity before a devastating storm. The decisive moment came when one of Barrios' friends, trying to record the confrontation for his social media, approached too closely with his smartphone, invading Pacquiao's personal space disrespectfully. It was the perfect catalyst. In a reflexive movement, Rodrigo Mendes brusquely pushed away the hand with the phone, causing an imbalance that resulted in the device falling to the floor. This seemingly simple gesture triggered a chain reaction. Mario's friend advanced against Rodrigo. Security guards emerged from all sides, voices rose in multiple languages, and the controlled chaos that had always been lurking finally materialized, amid the flashing lights and deafening music of the most exclusive club in Las Vegas that night. The Apex Club security guards moved with the coordinated precision of an elite team, forming a human cordon that effectively separated the two groups, before the physical confrontation could escalate into something truly damaging. Sofia Beltran, with her experience in crisis management involving celebrities, quickly took control of the situation, signaling for the DJ to lower the volume of the music while the main lights were partially turned on, breaking the enchantment of the festive atmosphere and clearly signaling that the moment of fun had ended. At her command, discreet corridors were opened through the crowd of spectators, creating separate exit routes for both groups of fighters, a standard tactic to avoid subsequent encounters in the parking lot or at the hotel entrances. The expressions on Manny Pacquiao's face alternated between frustration and resignation as he allowed himself to be led to a private room at the back of the establishment, away from curious eyes and the relentless cameras of smartphones. Decades under public scrutiny had taught him that, regardless of the real facts, the narrative that would prevail would be the one captured in fragmented videos and shared on social media in the coming hours. Rodrigo Mendes walked beside him, murmuring apologies in Portuguese and English alternately, visibly concerned about the repercussions of the incident for the meticulously built reputation of his protégé over the years. In the adjacent room, Mario Barrios was confronted by his manager, Ricardo Velasquez, a veteran of the boxing industry who had built and destroyed careers with equal ease over the years. Ricardo's harsh words, although spoken in a low voice, carried the weight of millions of dollars in contracts and opportunities that could evaporate as quickly as an athlete's reputation deteriorates in the digital era. The young fighter, now with the effect of alcohol rapidly diminishing in the face of the gravity of the situation, began to process the possible consequences of his impulsive actions, his face reflecting the late regret that frequently accompanies decisions made in the heat of the moment. Lucas Fontenelle, the club manager, moved between the rooms where the two groups were isolated, his French accent becoming more pronounced with stress as he simultaneously tried to calm tempers and minimize damage to the establishment's reputation. His promises of discretion sounded hollow in a world where each person carried a camera in their pocket, and his worried glances at the security monitors confirmed that images of the confrontation were already being shared on social media, spreading with the relentless speed that only scandals involving celebrities can achieve in the digital age. Meanwhile, in the main hall of the club, other VIP guests were discreetly informed by trained staff that the establishment would be closing earlier due to unexpected technical issues, a transparent excuse that no one openly questioned, but which generated whispers and speculation among those present. Eduardo Vega, the commentator whose initial provocation had triggered the whole situation, observed the scene with a mixture of professional satisfaction and genuine personal regret, already mentally formulating how he would frame the incident. In his next broadcast to maximize audience, while minimizing his own culpability, in the events of that fateful night in Las Vegas. The sky began to lighten with the first rays of sun when Manny Pacquiao's limousine left the underground parking of the hotel complex, following surprisingly empty streets by Las Vegas standards. The driver, accustomed to the discretion necessary when transporting celebrities, maintained the respectful silence that the situation demanded, while in the back seat, the Filipino boxer observed the city through darkened windows with a contemplative expression. The neon lights, so vibrant during the night, now seemed pale and artificial against the growing blue of the desert sky, a metaphor not lost on someone who had witnessed so many times how the shine of fame could dissipate quickly with the arrival of reality. In his hotel room, Mario Barrios faced a sleepless dawn, mentally reviewing the events of the night while his manager, Ricardo Velázquez, conducted an endless series of phone calls in the adjacent room, trying to control the damage. Each notification on his smartphone brought a new message from friends, family, or colleagues from the boxing world, some offering support, others expressing disappointment at the wasted opportunity to learn from a living legend of the sport. In a moment of rare honesty with himself, Mario recognized that his posture had been motivated more by the desire for public validation than by any genuine disagreement with Pacquiao's methods or career. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of the sports world, the gears of the media machine were already in full operation. Sports journalists who had received videos of the confrontation worked furiously to publish their versions of the events before the competition, each adding their own interpretation and context to the developing narrative. Valentina Cruz, the experienced promoter who had tried to intervene during the confrontation, was now on the phone with various executives from sports channels, trying to transform the incident from a potential public relations crisis into a promotional opportunity, demonstrating the characteristic ability of industry veterans to extract value even from the most unfavorable situations. In the presidential suite at the Bellagio, Rodrigo Mendes prepared an herbal tea for Manny, a special mixture he had brought from Brazil specifically for moments of stress during preparation for competitions. The Brazilian specialist moved silently through the luxurious space, respecting the moment of introspection of the fighter who was now sitting on the balcony, observing the iconic fountain of the hotel dance under the sky that gradually changed from dark blue to shades of orange and pink. The relationship between the two men had strengthened in recent months, transcending the professional dynamic to something closer to a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared values about discipline and excellence. For Manny Pacquiao, the night represented an unexpected but necessary reminder of the more unpleasant aspects of fame that had accompanied his extraordinary journey from the poor streets of General Santos City to the top of the international boxing world. As he sipped the tea prepared by Rodrigo, his thoughts wandered between practical concerns about how the incident would affect his public image and deeper reflections on legacy, mentorship, and the responsibility he felt toward younger generations of fighters. Pacquiao had learned over the years that some of the most valuable lessons came disguised as setbacks, and there was something in Barrios's youthful arrogance that reminded him of his own attitude at the beginning of his career, before painful defeats and life experiences taught him the humility that now defined his character, both inside and outside the ring. The conference room at the MGM Grand had been meticulously prepared for the emergency meeting convened by the representatives of Manny Pacquiao and Mario Barrios after the previous night's incident. Executives from important sports broadcasters occupied one end of the polished wooden table, while press officers and lawyers specializing in crisis management filled the remaining seats. The buzz of tense conversations instantly diminished when the doors opened and the two protagonists of the controversy entered the environment, surprisingly side by side and without the animosity that had characterized their encounter at the club. Behind the scenes, away from the curious eyes of the press already gathering in the hotel lobby, a sincere conversation had taken place moments before in a small adjacent room. Manny Pacquiao, impeccably dressed in a navy blue tailored suit, listened attentively while Mario Barrios, visibly nervous but determined, offered a sincere apology for the events of the previous night. The young fighter's words revealed a surprising maturity, recognizing that his behavior had been motivated by insecurity, disguised as arrogance, and by a misdirected desire to establish his name at the expense of a respected veteran. Valentina Cruz observed the interaction with a discreet smile, having orchestrated this private meeting hours earlier, recognizing its potential not only to resolve the immediate tension, but to create a narrative of redemption that would benefit both fighters. Pacquiao's response to the apology came in the form of an unexpected offer, an invitation for Barrios to visit his training camp in the Philippines after their respective current commitments. This generous gesture, characteristic of the life philosophy that the Filipino had developed over the years, transcended the simple acceptance of apologies to offer a genuine opportunity for learning and professional growth. Mario's eyes widened, with surprise, recognizing the inestimable value of this offer, not only in technical terms, but also as a symbol of acceptance by one of the greatest living legends of the sport he had chosen as a career. When the press conference began, the journalists present, who had arrived expecting to feed on tension and drama, now found themselves witnessing a genuine moment of growth and reconciliation. Manny spoke with the characteristic wisdom he had gained not only from his achievements in the ring but from his extraordinary life journey. He briefly addressed the events of the previous night, transforming them into a broader reflection on passion for the sport, learning through mistakes, and the importance of humility even at the height of success. When he passed the microphone to Mario, the young fighter demonstrated a surprising eloquence, speaking about how the true test of a champion is not only in how he behaves in victories, but in how he responds to his own mistakes. As the conference continued, addressing the details of how both would continue their careers with mutual respect, Eduardo Vega observed from the last row with a thoughtful expression. The commentator who had provoked the whole situation did not go unnoticed by his professional colleagues, who now stared at him with disapproving looks. In the messages that incessantly flashed on his cell phone, the director of his network demanded explanations about his unethical behavior and summoned him for an urgent meeting. The initial satisfaction of having generated an exclusive story was now transforming into real concern about the consequences for his own career. Vega understood belatedly that he had crossed an important line in sports journalism, using his position to incite conflict instead of reporting it with impartiality, a lesson he was now learning the hard way. Las Vegas, a city built on the premise of luck and chance, had once again served as a stage for an unlikely encounter that, against all expectations, resulted not in a passing scandal, but in the beginning of a partnership that promised to enrich the world of boxing through the union between the venerable experience of a Filipino legend and the emerging talent of a new generation of fighters, demonstrating that even in the most unlikely situations, mutual respect and greatness of spirit can prevail over ego and momentary differences. As they left the hall side by side, Pacquiao and Barrios symbolized what the sport had best to offer, not just competition, but the ability to transform rivalry into respect and conflict into growth. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to our channel.